welcome to the second Saturday Night Live by the Vandy Alumni in Malaysia Chapter. This session we have our forum, which has the topic of Black Gold, the future of oil. This SNL follows the first SNL that we had a couple of months ago. So it's something that we hope to continue to do, and we appreciate you and thank you so much for being here today with us. My name is Shafiqah Zulkifli, and I will be your moderator for today. I graduated from the Vanderbilt University class of 2017. And right now I'm working as you can see there, I'm a planning analyst. I just started a new role with ExxonMobil. Okay. And today I have been given the great opportunity to moderate this conversation between esteemed speakers that we have here on board with us from various parts of the oil and gas industry. So first off, we have Farhana Harun. Okay, so Farhana was my senior when I was a freshman in Vanderbilt. Farhana is pioneer right now with ONG Consult. She graduated from Vanderbilt class of 2014. Then we have Fadzil Harun, the lead reservoir engineering consultant for Schlumberger. Graduated Vanderbilt class of 2001. And last but not least, we have Yuzaini, who is currently an executive assistant at the PETRONAS President's Office, class of 1998. So we have a spread of the skills that we have here today. Okay, so before we go ahead and let the speakers introduce themselves through the first round of questions, I'm gonna invite my friend Ayman, also Vanderbilt class of 2017, to recite some prayers.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا حامدين حمدا شاكرين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيده يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا ولوالدينا وارحمهم كما ربونا صغارا اللهم ارزقنا علما نافعا وعملا مقبولا ورزقا واسعا وذنبا مغفورا والشفاء من كل داء وعلة يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى اللهم أحسن عاقبتنا في الأمور كلها وأجرنا من خزي الدنيا وعذاب الآخرة برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Okay, thank you very much, Ayman. Hopefully with that prayer, we'll have a blessed and good conversation tonight. So before we begin the first round of questions, I just wanted to remind the attendees that you can ask questions throughout the forum today. Please do so by utilizing the chat function at the bottom of the screen. So if you don't see anything at the bottom of your screen, just click on the screen just click on the screen or hover on the screen, and you should be able to see like a ribbon of options at the bottom. So you can type anything down here in the chat box, okay? And I will help to input your questions as we go along with the speakers, or you can also hold your questions until the end of our forum, okay? All right, so without further ado, let's move on to the first round of questions. As I'm looking through the participant list here, wow, we now have close to 60 people joining us today. Welcome everyone once again. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm looking here and I'm seeing that many here are actually beyond the Vanderbilt alumni circle. So we have folks who are not from Vanderbilt. So we'd like to welcome you guys to our little Vanderbilt family here. Since a lot of you guys may not be from Vanderbilt, you might not know that Vanderbilt's theme colors or collegiate colors is actually black and gold. So it actually fits really well with the topic of our conversation tonight, which is regarding black gold, like a saying we have to call oil. We realized this when we were choosing the a good name for this topic, so it kind of fits well. Coincidentally here, you have a lot of alumni that actually work in the oil and gas industry, not just limited to the four who are here. So it kind of fits, black and gold as our collegiate colors, and we work in the black gold industry. So but interestingly enough, none of the us Vanderbilt graduates actually graduated with a petroleum engineering bachelor's degree. I know some of us actually continue on to take on petroleum engineering as postgraduates, but generally Vanderbilt does not have a petroleum engineering degree. So it'll be interesting for us to understand how our esteemed panelists here, who did not graduate with a petroleum engineering degree, ended up in the oil and gas industry. So starting off with the youngest panelist, my senior, Farhana, tell us a bit about what you studied in Vandy and basically how did you end up in the oil and gas industry, and basically where are you right now in the industry?
So hi, Assalamualaikum. Hi everyone. Thank you for tuning in. So again, my name is Farhana Harun, or some people call me Faan. So if you are interchangeable between Farhana or Faan, so that's basically the same person, which is me. So I graduated in 2014 in Bachelor of Engineering, Mechanical Engineering, and also in Engineering Management minor. So during that time, of course, we don't have petroleum engineering background. So I was JPA scholar or Public Service Department of Malaysia scholar. We went there and I was there in 2010, I think. So there's like 40 plus of us in the batch. A few of them are ExxonMobil scholar. So we got a lot of mix of different backgrounds. So we have chemical, chemical, electrical, and I choose mechanical. So, we arrived there in 2010 and we went through 6 weeks of PAVE. So that's when we started to meet each other. We dated each other. That's when we started to assimilate at Vandy, basically. So we're going to be together for the next 4 years. It was fun. So this photo of us, you can see this is us. My batch, there's some people missing. But then we were there for 4 years, and then it was fun. And I think almost every year we celebrated our anniversary there. So this is photo of us from a picnic at the Parthenon. So if Wendy people might remember Parthenon. So yeah, and then we graduated in 2014. Back then, it was the high of one of the popular industry in Malaysia, oil and gas. So, but at the time when I graduated, I came back. I was like, okay, I just try my luck. I sent my applications to many companies. So one of them is Petra Energy. So I got into oil and gas there at Petra Energy. As at that time they had a fast track engineer program. So the graduate they were like 13, 14 of us. So we got there, and then we went through a series of what do you call it? um, a series of exposure in different departments. So by the end of the program, we had to choose what are the discipline that we wanted to choose. So me, being in mechanical engineering background, you can choose either to be as planning engineer or you can choose to be in piping engineer. So basically that's when it all started. So I choose piping engineer. And then I still remember my boss was asking me, are you sure you want to be a piping engineer? Because I think at the time there wasn't a lot of female piping engineer at our company. So he was like, are you sure you wanted to be piping engineer? You have to, climb up or go down somewhere, crawling here and there and everywhere. So I was like, why not? I think that fits me well because, I'm kind of like those kind of challenges. So that was when I was in Petro Energy as contractor. So that was like a few years ago. So that's when I first started to go to site for fabrication, and then to offshore for installation and those kind of stuff. So fast forward a few years later. So last year I changed my portfolio sort of, still in piping engineering, but instead of as a contractor, I'm now in a consultant. So it's basically before this I do all the works. Now before this it was more physical work, installation and stuff. But now it's more that for me doing all the data sheets, all the technical parts, all the drawings that is going to be used later on by the contractor. So right now I'm as consultant, so I do some of the engineering stuff and also some of the design stuff. It's still similar, it's still in piping, but it's getting much more technical now. So that was my story. So from Vanderbilt, we don't have petroleum engineering back then, but different background, you can still do different things in later on in oil and gas. Yeah. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I guess that it's not everyone would be able to join the industry, join the oil and gas at the peak of the industry. So I guess you are lucky in that sense, and being able to work in both the execution side and also in the now in the engineering side of things. It will be good exposure. So good. All right. Then moving on to Fazil. Can you tell us a bit about yourself from Vandy days, and then how you ended up in oil and gas right now?
Yep. Thanks, Chap, and organizers for inviting me for this event. Really appreciate that, and it's a pleasure to actually spend time with all the audience there. I mean, being raised in a small town in Batu Pahat, Johor, I was actually never thought that I will become engineer one day, and let alone petroleum engineers. So, Allah has a path for me. He set a path for me. So I was in Vanderbilt. I graduated in 2001 in electrical engineering. Farhana was lucky because of she had a lot of colleagues as her batches, but during my time, we had only 6. So we were called the freshmen until now. So to answer your questions, my career in oil and gas is all started in my third year actually. In my third year degree, I was actually called for an interview by a big oil corporations, which is ExxonMobil. They actually called a few of myself and a few of my colleagues, a few of my batchmates. They actually flew us exclusively from Tennessee to Houston, but 2 hours and a half, I guess, 2 hours of flights. I guess it's a business class, and then they actually put us in a 5-star hotels, and then that's my first impression of oil and gas. This is a really lucrative industry, I believe, right? So I went on for the interviews, like five of the sessions, 5 panelists of interviews. The interview was so difficult, but fortunately I survived that interviews, and then I got a job when I was in 4th year. Before I graduated from Vanderbilt, I got a job in oil and gas. So my path of entry to oil and gas is actually very easy, because when I came back to Malaysia, I already got a job, and then the job is already with oil and gas company, which is a dream of everyone. And then with ExxonMobil, it's like everyone knows who Exxon is, right? So it was an easy entry for me. Little did I know that actually what I'm getting myself into, because my bachelor degree was in electrical engineering. And then what I'm doing, what ExxonMobil offered me was actually subsurface engineers. So being a subsurface engineer, I knew nothing about petroleum terms at all, because in electrical engineering, whoever did electrical engineering, you know that you will work with capacitors, resistors and everything. And then when I joined ExxonMobil as a subsurface engineer, they actually give me a role that is alien to me. So I spent there about 1.5 years before I decided to actually strengthen my fundamentals. So I decided to pursue my master's degree in Scotland, in Harvard universities, and then under the sponsorship of University PETRONAS. And then after I finished and graduated from Harvard, I spent 5 to 6 years becoming a lecturer in UTP, in University PETRONAS in Toronto, Perak. So then I spent a lot of times learning about fundamentals of engineering. People say that when you teach someone, you actually learn a lot from it. So this really happened for me. It's like I really stand true to that. When you teach someone, so I had to teach a lot of students first year, second year, up until final years. So I was a lecturer, and when you have to teach and then you have to learn, and then that's where I strengthened my fundamentals in oil and gas. And then from there, I was offered, after 6 years in UTP, I was offered a job in industries in Schlumberger, and knowing that I had developed a strong fundamental and passions in oil and gas, going into Schlumberger is actually quite easy because I know what I want to do. So in Schlumberger, there were two paths, like technical path and also managerial paths. So for me, I had experienced both. They sent me to several places. The latest one, they sent me out to Vietnam to become a reservoir engineering manager. And then I came back to Malaysia in 2014, and then I started my technical ladder. Coming back from managerial ladders, I came back to Malaysia and pursued my technical passions. So right now I'm the lead reservoir engineering consultant for Asia, and I'm doing a lot of projects. And recently my projects was related to a field located in North Sea, in Aberdeen. The field is already gone through a field development plan, and there I am. So I'm glad to be here. I hope that I can share my experience with you guys. Yep.
All right, thank you so much. So a lot of people would be surprised, I suppose, from electrical engineering. Now you are actually working with one of the most technically driven companies in subsurface engineering. So I guess strengthening your fundamentals is a key thing, and also being open to learn and being open to explore what is out there is important for you to flourish in whatever your passion is, because like you said, you didn't expect that you would be so passionate in the oil and gas industry, right? So
definitely, okay, I think for me, learning the hard way is actually the best way for you to learn. So I find that learning the hard way is a good way to learn something. Yeah, thanks, Chow.
All right. Okay, and so lastly we have Yus. So come on, tell us a bit about yourself, Yus. Where you are now, your in.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening and good day to everyone, to the fellow Vandy alumni, and also everyone's joining this webinar. My name is Yuzaini Yusof. I come from Muar, Johor. I started my education in boarding school in one of the science school, Sekolah Sains Tunku Jaafar in Kuala Pilah, for 5 years, and got the JPA scholarship out of high school from SPM result, and that's where my journey to US comes about. So I was there in '94 when the time there is no mobile phone, no digital camera. Internet was still using Netscape, and the famous social media during that time was IRC, Internet Relay Chat, with a black screen. So just imagine during that time compared to where we are right now. So joined a PAVE program in the summer of 94, graduated in 98. I got an interview with Motorola. If anyone still remember Motorola, one of the biggest smartphones and also still the cellular and radio producer in the world. So that's during the junior year where for Fadzil, he got to fly to Houston for the interview. For me, I got to fly to Phoenix, 4 hours flight to Phoenix, and interviewed during the junior year. So I got a job actually, but because I was sponsored by JPA, just like Farhana, so I have to come back. So Motorola offered me a job in Malaysia. So while I got the release from JPA. So fortunately, during that time, it was, well, unfortunately for the whole Malaysia during that time is in the financial crisis in 97, 98. But so then JPA can release most of the scholars. So I'm one of them. So I got the opportunity to work with Motorola for about 4 years. Spent a time in Austin, Texas, in 2000, early 2000, for about 10 months. So it was a great experience, become a product and test engineer, because I was a bachelor in engineering for electronics and semiconductor. So it's only natural for me to work with a semiconductor industry during that time. So the world changed after 2000 when I'm back to from US after that stint of working attachment. The 9/11 came about. It totally changed the world. And then there was war in Iraq. So there was a lot of effect to the world economies and even geopolitical situation around the world. So, and then I was thinking about my career as well. In 2003, after about spending 4 years in the semiconductor industry, I think that I want to venture something else. And I remember that during my high school years, I was sponsored by PETRONAS during that time. Beasiswa kecil PETRONAS for a high school kid is big. So I think, why not oil and gas industry? So I got a friend, I got a roommate actually that was from Vendi as well, Zarim. He invited me for an interview in Kerteh, Terengganu. And there I was, been in Kerteh for about 12 years. Started my career as maintenance engineer, and then move up the rank, going offshore, become the supervisors, and then offshore installation manager, and handling day-to-day operation in the platforms, offshore platforms. So it was a great experience, 6 years there, and then got promoted, and then opportunity to travel overseas. I was a joint venture manager in Iraq, stayed in Dubai for 3 years, and come back to Kerteh, where I started my career in oil and gas, and then become the head of production, also in operation. And then last year, I come back to HQ, the Twin Tower, KLCC, lead a transformation team for the upstream outfit. And then after that, I was appointed as one of the executive assistant in the president and CEO office. So that's my journey so far in the industry, about 16 years in oil and gas. Started my career as operation, and then move up to joint venture, commercial, and then now in corporates.
Okay, great. See, that's another take from not being in the oil and gas industry from the beginning, then suddenly you transition into the oil and gas industry. So, and I guess that takes a lot of courage to do that, because, like you said, you were doing that in the turn of the during the economic downturn, right? So,
Yep.
so I guess what's important for us to realize, because none of us here graduated with a petroleum engineering degree, right? But somehow, one way or another, we ended up working in oil and gas. So I guess what's important to understand or like to realize is that your whatever you study, whatever your degree is, shouldn't define whatever you want to do. By right, you should be brave enough to realize what you would like to do and be open. If you don't know yet, be open to try and learn about whatever is out there. So I guess and at one point, right, all the panelists here are clueless or were clueless about the oil and gas industry, because like I said, we did not learn about petroleum engineering or whatever in college. But naturally, now that you are in the oil and gas industry, you would have a deeper understanding of this industry. And I would think that from the first day you joined and now after like many years in the industry, you would have an evolved understanding of what the industry is. So because for most people who are not in the industry, right, this industry can be quite vague. Or like quite unknown. For example, if I say that I work in an oil and gas company, automatically people will assume that it's PETRONAS because that is what is most visible to folks out there. Then if folks if folks live in Terengganu or in Johor, right, they might be familiar with the one at Kerteh, the processing terminal at Kerteh or the processing terminal at Pengerang, right? So it's only what they see. Yet there's just so much more to this industry that people actually don't see. So what in your mind, what is the oil and gas industry really? Given your background, how would you describe that to the general public? We can start off with Fadzil this time round.
Yeah, thank you, Chap. I mean, yeah, Vic is a word that used to describe me like in 2001 when I started my career in ExxonMobil. I don't know anything about whatever the terms that they use, right? So learning the hard way. So what I'm trying to do now is actually to make it simple for the audience to actually understand what practically we are doing. Okay, so to learn something, you have to love something, and to love something, you really have to learn something. So in this case, let's imagine a million years back. So when the oil starts, I mean, like, what is the origin of oil? So in this case, let's imagine that a million years ago there's a plant and animals that has been dead and being buried in the subsurface. The subsurface in these terms is actually can be 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers from the surface of the earth, right? So under the surface of the earth, this plant and animals has been dead, has been buried, right? So under a certain pressure and a certain temperatures, this organic content actually turns from kerogens to oil and gas. So this oil and gas is actually trapped and located somewhere under the surface of the earth, which we don't know, right? So before it's actually being sold in the petrol stations, this is the origin of the oil that we have to understand. So as I mentioned just now, this oil or gas, which undergoes a lot of pressures and temperature changes, is actually being trapped somewhere in the subsurface. The subsurface can be 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers from the surface of the earth, which you can't see from your naked eyes, right? So 10 kilometers, I'm imagining if I'm from Cyberjaya, I'm actually, my sister is actually in Subang, for example, right? So those are 10 kilometers from Cyberjaya to Subang. I can imagine how the road is, but from the surface of the earth, 5 kilometers down or 10 kilometers down, I don't even know what it is, right? So there's a lot of challenges that involve for the oil and gas companies to actually produce it. But even before that, let me talk about how it's being searched, right? So the oil, as I mentioned, is actually being trapped and being stored in the subsurface. So we don't know where is it. So all the oil and gas companies, their job and their investment has to go into finding where the oil is. So this is what we call the terms of upstream. Upstream is is the term used to define exploration and productions. When I mentioned companies spend a lot of money to actually perform and conduct this stage, I'm talking about 600 billion US dollars. That is the actual statistic in 2016, where a company spent a total of 600 billion US dollars to actually search for an oil and produce it. So 600 billion, if you're talking about, if we can actually build 600 KLCC buildings. So I searched in Google just now, it's like KLCC costs around 1.2 billion. So 600 billion investment by companies to search for an oil and produce it is equal to rebuilding 600 KLCC buildings. So that's how expensive, that's how the amount of money that company use to actually spend. So what company do during exploration and stage is to actually search for oil, because we don't know where the oil is located, right? So this company has to work really hard to actually search the location of the oil by using a lot of technologies. One of the technologies is seismic technologies, where we actually send signal and we receive it. So from seismic interpretations or seismic technologies, it will actually give us a form of signal that we can actually turn into a concept or model. So from there, the company can actually evaluate it, whether the oil is there, how much the oil that they can produce, and whether they can find more within those areas of oil that they have found. So once they have actually evaluated those, right, the amount of oil that they have and the difficulty for them to actually produce it, this is actually an integration work that we have to perform. Me as an engineer, for example, reservoir engineers, we have to work with drilling engineers, we have to work with production engineers, we even have to work with geologists to come up with the best justifications of the oil down there, the amount of the oil down there, and how much we can actually produce it, and what are the risks that is involved in terms of producing it. So those needs a lot of work, right? So as I mentioned, going from Cyberjaya to Subang to my sister's place, I know already how to be there, because when I look at the ways, when I look at the Google Maps, I know which direction I need to take. But if you're talking about 10 kilometers down there, there's a lot of uncertainties that involve in those exploration and productions of those oil. So what we need to do as an oil company is they invest a lot in terms of measuring the data, take a lot of data, take a lot of samples, so that what they do with the data and samples, they analyze it to actually increase their confidence that those oil that is trapped down there can actually be produced to the surface in a safety manners. At the same time, ensuring that the economics justifications of that project is fully justified. So once the team has actually confident with the amount of oil down there and how they want to produce it, this is what we call field development plan. So once we have come up with the field development plan and we present it to the interested companies or interested bodies in certain countries, for example, I'm working in the projects in North Sea, I have to present it to OGA UK. So once they actually convinced with what we plan to do, so we pass it to drilling engineers. So what drilling engineers will have to do is to actually drill a well there. Drill a well for those who are not familiar with oil and gas. It's practically like putting a straw there and produce it, right? So once we have passed this to drilling engineers, this is where we say that the oil can actually produce from surface to subsurface to surface. And then from here, the oil will go from that well, from subsurface to surface through a well, and then it will go through a pipeline to the surface facilities. For the next part, I think Farhana is the right person to talk about this. So I'm passing this to Farhana to tell the audience more how this oil is being treated in the surface. Go to you, Farhana.
Okay, so same question. So basically, even before I started in oil and gas industry, I was like, okay, I know I've heard about drilling rigs and all. And then I heard about, the basic thing is that, okay, the final product is the one that we use, the gas for cooking and the oil for the fuel and also for aviation, for our cars. So, but once I got into the industry, I was like, oh, there's like a huge technicalities and complexities within this industry alone. And we're not just talking about the rig, the drilling parts, and also the processing parts later on and onshore. But in between those, there are a lot of things that going on behind the scenes. So from my experience as well as piping engineer, so but before we go into piping engineering, so if you can see at the slide, everything that is under the surface, under the sea, so all those are not piping, all those are considered as pipeline. So those pipelines are the ones going to the onshore. Normally in East Malaysia, most of them being transported via this pipeline. So pipeline is basically under the sea. Those are the things that you cannot see at the top. And that is a different discipline than mine. So my discipline is piping engineering. So basically it's what you can see at the top side. So top side is referring to all the facilities that you can see on top of the surface. Here in the slide, you can see the central processing facility, or also known as platform. And also we are used to see, and also a new ones that I think is not a lot of people familiar with is floating production storage and offtake vessel, or we call it as FPSO. So platform, FPSO, these are among the common facilities offshore. So my job as piping engineer is like to make sure all the oils that is being extracted by Fadil and his team. So being transported later on, being processed before it is being transported to onshore. So you can imagine the huge facilities, the platform or on the FPSO. It contains a lot of equipment, big equipment, generators, turbine, tanks, and you name it, separator, vessels, many types of different equipment. So in my job is to make sure the oil extracted is being flowed from one point to another. So basically the piping, you can imagine is your plumbing at your house. But this time, instead of transporting water, it's transporting oil and gas. So in order for the oil and gas to be transported later on to onshore facilities, it has to go through certain processes. So that's where you have all these huge equipment. And I think most of the weight, other than the structural weight for the facilities, most of the weight comes from this piping as well, because it allows the oil being transported from the manifold, the header, to one equipment to another equipment. So once you completed all the, I would say, processes, then only it can, and meet certain criteria, then only it can be transported to onshore. So there are a few kinds of transportation. So the ones that we're familiar with, as you can see here, the gas export pipeline. So basically those are going to the pipeline, it's under the sea, you cannot see it on top of the surface. Or if it's coming from FPSO, it will be transported to via pipeline also. But this one, it will be going to the vessel that will come every once in a while to nearby the FPSO, and then it will transport it to onshore. So basically, people are always confused with pipeline and also piping. So I'm more towards the top side. So that's what we're referring to, top sides, whatever you can see on top of the surface. So I hope that explains a bit on what I do. Then I'll leave it to Yus to explain more in details on the production parts.
All right. Thank you, Fadzil and Farhana. It was a very good explanation on the upstream side. So I come from upstream as well. So what I'm going to tell you is something that a bit different. When people ask me about what oil and gas industry is all about, it's actually the whole end-to-end value chain. So basically, starting from upstream, so where you find the oil through exploration, and then when you have a sizable resources and reserve, you will develop it. And as what Farhana has explained, some of the facilities that they use to build platforms and then transfer it to onshore. So then after that, you produce. So then that is called upstream. So what comes from the ground, you have to be flowing to the surface with the facilities, and then you have a pipeline, whether it's onshore or offshore, and goes to the onshore facilities. So basically, if you look at the chart there, so once it comes from platform or onshore wells platform or well facilities, you go to a two distinct matters, which is the crude, the oil, and also the gas. So the crude will go to the refining. The refining in Malaysia, you heard about Penapisan Melaka and Penapisan Terengganu, and also you have one in Port Dickson as well, and another one in Pengerang, Johor, the latest one. So for at refinery, you will separate the product, and then it will become either going to the market through the refining chamber, and then it will become fuel. So that will be the commercial going to a petrol station, or it can convert it into jet A1 fuel for airplane, and also it can also be the LPG. And then you have the other side is the gas processing facilities. So the gas can be either going to the liquefied, where you call LNG, and then it can be sent to all the world, like in Malaysia, where we have Bintulu MLNG plant, where the customer can be countries such as Japan, Korea, China, Taiwan, and also you also produce or process the gas, the lower, like ethane and methane, it can go to the power plant. The methane goes to the power plant, and then you can refine the product more. Like ethane, you can go to the petrochemical, and then it can refine more, and then become a product that you see in the market, such as a lot of the chemical, ethylene, propylene, benzene, toluene, xylene, all those is used in a lot of petrochemical products such as plastics, rubber, resin, synthetic fibers, adhesive, detergent, pesticide, and whatnot. So there's a lot of products coming from just oil and gas that was buried in the subsurface. So you can see that, you can imagine that the value change from just oil and gas is refined, and then it can become more product for the industry, a different industry, whether you are petrochemical, steel, and then become a urea, ammonia, and also can produce hydrogen. And on top of that, the gas is also supplied to the power sector. Like in Malaysia, about 60 to 70% of our electricity are depending on gas. Then the rest are from coal plant. And then now we heard about the renewable energy coming from solar and wind. We started with that as well. So it's the overall value change from subsurface to the customer. So on top of that, the whole cycle require manpower, the human capital side, where it's not just the engineers. You have also like the corporate and non-technical function as well. You need people, scientists. You need R&Ds, digital, HR, finance, and whatnot. So basically, everyone that come from the university or with any degree, you can join the oil and gas industry. So the sky is the limit. So even like what me and Fadzil have shown, that even though you come from a different background, so the oil and gas industry is ever changing, and there's a lot of trainings available that you can move around in the different. Either you can go from technical to non-technical, or different technical skill to a different technical skill. So yeah, so that's what can I explain a little bit about the oil and gas industry.
Okay, thank you to all three speakers for sharing that. As you can see, this oil and gas industry, it's a huge and complex industry. It takes a lot of hands are involved in this. It takes a lot of resources, of money to just even explore or understand where is the oil. It takes a lot to process the oil and transport it from the in the middle of the ocean to somewhere where you can actually process it. And as you mentioned last there, even the that come from oil and gas. It takes a lot to process them, not to mention to market them, and like putting it in the energy network, and also to supply for the petrochemical industries. It's really a lot. And in addition to that, it's all the support that goes with that, right? All the finance, human resources that's needed to spin, or like to move this oil and gas industry. So it and adding to that complexity, right? To the complexity, the industry is already so big, and adding to that is this dependence of this industry on the commodity price. Naturally, right? We're selling oil, so whether we're lucrative or not would depend on the oil price, which the oil price in and of itself is influenced by so many other factors that you can or cannot control. So and folks in the industry are familiar with the cyclic nature of the oil and gas. For example, Yus joined when in the downturn of the economy. Then you have Farhana, who joined in much later, and you have at the peak of the industry, right? So it's natural in the oil and gas industry to see prices go up and go down. However, what we are seeing right now, especially in this new norm, in this new norm world, right? It's quite unprecedented. We see negative oil prices happening. And a lot of people are, I guess, quite concerned on whether or not this is actually something that will be long term, so I guess what's your view, right, of how the industry is doing amidst all this? It's really tough times right now. So what do you think, what are we doing to kind of adapt and make sure that we can still the oil and gas industry can still remain productive in these tough times? So any thoughts, Farhana, on that end?
Okay, so basically I joined in 2015, January 2015. At that time, I mean, in around 1 year, around that, the oil price is about 100 barrel per dollar. It had reached that much. But now it's really hard to even get the 3 digits anymore. So let's be realistic here. And then I would say that previously, 20, 30 years ago, the technology is like very limited, or maybe not that well advanced as we have now. So during that time, as you can see here, fixed platform is actually a popular facilities, offshore facilities that are being built here and there. So that's what we have now. We can see a lot of this, especially in East Malaysia, and also the east coast of Malaysia, where we have a fixed platform. So that's like the conventional ways to do it. But now the technology has evolved. So yes, there are still fixed platforms being built here and there, but I would say that the approach is a bit different now. For example, as you can see in the slide here, there are a lot of different types of facilities. So I mentioned just now about the fixed platform and also the FPSO. So I would like also to mention about MOPU, which stands for Mobile Offshore Platform Unit. So this mobile offshore platform units, it is widely used now rather than the fixed platforms. But of course, it depends on the reservoir and also the design life for how long the oil or gas is expected to be there. So I would like to mention about the FPSO just now. FPSO is basically a part of MOPU. So you can imagine MOPU is actually, you can actually move it from one point to another. The name itself represents that mobile. So fixed platform, you build it and that is just there for maybe for 20, 30 years. Unless if you want to upgrade, for example, you found a lot more potentials for rig to come in to drill, and then you will find some more gas or oil in the reservoir, maybe 20, 30 meters, kilometers away. And then the technology now will allow those untapped reservoirs to be drilled, and then that will increase the capacity. Then these fixed platforms can be upgraded. It's either you increase the size, you increase the capacity, you increase the equipment sizing and all. But there's limitation to that because it will only be there. You cannot like, it's really hard. It is possible, but it's not really common to move this fixed platform from one point to another. But in contrast to that, the MOPU, so one of them is FPSO. And I would like to also mention that MOPU, it consists of many other mobile units. So for FPSO is actually an old vessel that is no longer being used to transport things, to transport oil. So it's being converted from a tanker to an FPSO. So you imagine the marine side, which is the vessel itself, is being converted. So instead of just transporting the oil and gas from one point to another, it is now fully capable of doing all the processes itself. So and then it's very convenient, which means that you can just take the old vessel and refurbish it basically. So it's going to add another 20, 30 years to the life for the FPSO. And another thing is that, drilling rigs come in and drill it, but some of the drilling rigs also have, have limitation. So when it can no longer be used to drill wells, so it is being converted also for as a platform. So those are the things that businesses has changed from the fixed platform to MOPU. It's very mobile. So once it's completed in one area, it can be moved to another area. So that is how I see some of the businesses develop for the facilities and how they optimize in this industry. I believe it is also for it will help them to saving for a long time. That is on the business side. On personal side, this is such a time that is very hard for all of us, not just oil and gas, and also other industry is also widely affected. So what I can say is that we have to fully equip ourselves. So maybe right now we don't have much projects, we don't have much commitments. So this is the right time to fully equip yourself with one way or another. It doesn't matter if you want to do the soft skill or upskilling your technical skills. If there's any chances for you to go for I would say courses, then just take this time to basically do it, because you never know. Because I've been there. In my experience, you are too busy with work, you don't have much time. You basically do the on-job training, but you don't really have that time to take a step back. Hey, I want to learn something else, I want to learn something new. So this is the best time I would say. It doesn't matter, it's not just oil and gas industry. I think it's also in any other industry as well. So you have to take this time to try your best to fully equip yourself, so that one day, especially those in oil and gas industry, once it bounces back, you're already ready for that. So that's how I would say, that's how I see it.
Thanks for that. And I think that's really important, right? Because everyone will experience the same situation, the same circumstance. In this case, it's the downfall of the oil and gas, or like oil and gas price. But what's important is how you react to it as an individual, and I guess as companies as well. How do the companies react and adapt in these tough times? And being able to adapt, and utilizing, instead of fixed platforms, using the FPSO vessel, as you can see here, which is more mobile and able to be used elsewhere. It's how that is how companies are adapting. Probably also some cost optimization. At least that's what's going on in my company, in terms of our spend, things like that. And what, I guess the more important thing is how we as individuals adapt to these tough times. And you bring up a strong point, right, on taking this opportunity to improve ourselves, to add skills to ourselves, so that we become relevant, and I guess marketable in a way, in this, even in the downfall of the oil and gas prices. Okay, thank you for that,
Yeah,
Farhana.
so I just want to mention that this is photo of me, and the background is actually the FPSO. Maybe not a lot of people know what is FPSO. So as you can see at the bottom part, the ship, the vessel itself is actually very old because it's being reused, refurbished. So all those things at the top, so those are the new stuff being added for the on the vessel, and then it will be used for at least 15-20 years. So I think it's very good ways to, try to reuse the all unused vessel. Yeah.
And people might not realize that, right? They would think that working in the oil and gas industry, everything is brand new, etc. When in fact you have a lot of repurposing going on, yeah, especially in these tough times. Okay, great. So then, okay, so yes, we are in these tough times, right? But I guess another question that is lingering in a lot of people's mind is that, how will we come back, right, to the normal times, or will we even come back to the normal times, when oil and gas industry, when the oil and gas price is like, well, oil price is about $60 per barrel. I think the healthiest one, a couple of, actually more than almost a year ago probably, but like right now it's down at the 30s, even at one point reaching negative oil prices. So what's your thought on that? How will we come back from this, and if we do, is it going to be like, where we once was? Will we ever reach $100 per barrel era again in the future?
Thank you, Chap, for the question. It's a very tough question. We don't have a crystal ball to predict what will happen to the oil price, but let's go back to the history. So basically, the oil price is a cyclic situation, like any other industry. The whole world. I've been in the semiconductor industry. It is also cyclic. Every 10 years, every 5 years, it will go up and down. So it depends on it, because in financial term, it's a supply and demand. It's all about supply and demand. So in the 70s, there was a major oil crisis because of the war. So every oil and gas usually come from the Middle Eastern country like Iran, Iraq during that time. So when there's a war, so then you have a glut of supply. You can't supply because everyone is at war. So that's why there's an energy crisis in 1979, where if you see old video in YouTube, you can see that people are queuing at the petrol station in Texas, in New York. There's no oil, so the price shoot up. So then that's where the OPECs come in the picture. So people call it as a cartel. So there is an organization of petroleum producing country. So, and then some country like United States and Britain, when they start producing oil, they increase the production. Then you get, when supply going up, shooting up compared to the demand, then there's a drop in the oil price. So that's what happened in the 80s. So, and then again, when the time comes where there's a control between supply and demand, then you can see it's creeping up, going up back, the price, until it reached one point, the oil price was $147. That's the highest oil price that we have seen. So that was peak at about 2008. So then there was a financial crisis in 2007, 2008. So it goes down again to the level like $30 per barrel, the lowest during that financial crisis in 2007, 2008. And again, it's a cyclic. You see in the 2014 when it's go up to 100, then suddenly it goes back down. But go back to the current situation that we are in 2020. So there is two incidents that happened that create this unprecedented event. So it's never have seen before in our lifetime. So in our industry, we call it the black swan and the gray rhino. Let me explain what is black swan. So black swan is unexpected, unpredictable, and not within the range of normal expectation. So this term comes about when there's a book on this black swan, where if you have geese, you usually swan usually is white, right? So they say there's no way that you can have a black swan. Then suddenly it appeared black swan in Australia. So I would say that it never predicted. So that's why the term black swan comes about. So in our current situation, COVID-19 is a black swan event. So it's unexpected. Nobody know that it's going to happen. So, but it happened. Nobody knows is coming. And another event that's happening was what we call Gray Rhino. So, you know, Gray Rhino is big, right? You see it. It's a probable event that is neglected, is there, but you don't know whether it will come to you or it just go away. Despite a potential profound impact, you know that if it hits you, is that going to damage your car or even injure yourself? So suddenly these two things happen in 2020. The Gray Rhino is what we call the incident that happened because of OPEC countries or the producer. They just walk out from Russia. Just walk out from the meeting in OPEC meeting in March, and that started the worst episode of the oil price, where it crashed until Shad mentioned about the negative oil price. When you say negative, it doesn't mean that the oil price it become negative. Because it's a supply and demand. You have to sell the crude when you produce it. But during that time, because there's no buyer that want to buy your crude, so it become like the seller have to pay to the buyer. So that's why you have that negative price. So in April, there was a negative $37 per barrel on the WTI, the Western Texas Index, intermediate prices. And then Brent plunged to $13 during that time as well, the lowest level in 2 decades. So you never heard that before. So basically, come back to the situation currently is because of that two situation that you had never seen it before, and nobody knows what's going to happen. We know that because of the lockdown, because of there's no international travel, so the demand will continue to go down. So OPEC have revised downward the outlook of the oil demand. Previously, during that Q2 between March to April, it was down to about 60. But now, because there is the lockdown around the world, goes back to about 90 million barrels per day. But currently, because of OPEC and non-OPEC producer are playing, they are in discussion whether they continue to supply more production or they cut. So if they still agree on the cutting, volunteer cut by all the OPEC and non-OPEC producer, then you can maintain the price as what we have right now, about $40 per barrel. But if it's somebody just do not comply and then overproduce, because you know that some countries like Iran, like Libya and Iraq, their GDP and their budget of the whole country depends on oil price. If they cannot produce, they cannot get the money for their budget. They can't even pay for salary for their government servant. So it's real. It's something that currently we're expecting. And another thing is, if you get the vaccine, currently we know that it's still ongoing testing and whatnot. So if the vaccine, you can get the vaccine within 1 year time, 2021, then you can have the level of demand going up. That will ease and also ease the lockdown. International travel can go up again. So I believe we can go, we can control the price, and then it will go back to the normal. But when you say $100, so it's very tough to go back to that level. So some people, some of the analysis in the industry says that it could be low for longer. So then that's why the oil and gas industry are currently bracing for impacts and also looking at what we call as energy transition, looking at how to reassess back our portfolio, pivot to the more cleaner energy like renewables, like hydrogens, even looking at EV, batteries, and all that renewable energy strategy in order to supplement the current issues that we have in the oil price, that to balance their portfolio so that you have the oil and gas and also you have the renewable energies in your portfolio. So it could be low for longer, and there's a need for the oil and gas industry to be agile and transform themselves to become more adaptive to the situation, looking at new technologies, looking at how to do using digital and remote operation. We are talking about remote operation, replacing the manpower with robots, even controlling from one location for all the plants around the world. It has been done for some of the simple plants, and also make it more cleaner. So this is the question that currently are being discussed and also in all of the company around the world. So digital and technology is very crucial and imperative to face the challenging world of oil and gas right now.
Thanks for the insight use, I guess. Yeah, the black swan is interesting, right? I like that what do you call that analogy or simile, I guess. Something that seen before, so that's interesting. And I guess the industry, everyone is bracing for impact, trying to get to at least where we were before is the goal. But unless we have the end in or the light at the end of the tunnel for the COVID situation, like you said, it probably is going to be like this new normal, has to how, like, similar to how we're living right now. Hopefully it doesn't last as long. Hopefully we'll find a solution soon, but nonetheless, everyone, like you said, bracing for impact, understanding what else can we do more, right? Adapting again through technology and digitalization, as a way for us to move forward. And you mentioned just now, right, relating to how one way of bracing for impact is for oil and gas companies to look to renewables as an alternative. And we're seeing a lot of that actually, right? We're seeing that a trend of oil and gas companies somewhat rebranding themselves to become not oil and gas companies, but rather energy companies, as they invest and explore more in renewable energy. So, for example, Shell has this new lens scenario that is suggesting that by 2050, the world would be potentially powered by for up to 40% of renewables. And you see companies like BP acquiring Europe's one of Europe's largest solar power project developers. So it seems like these oil and gas companies are moving towards a certain direction, right? So I guess a question for you, is that are renewables truly a viable source in the future, or is this just a way for oil and gas giants to just look better in the media?
Right. Thank you for the question, Shab. So basically, it goes back the critical part in this is for the energy companies to rebrand themselves is on the energy transition, right? So we can't rely on the oil price forever. We know that the supply and demand is affecting that. So everyone needs to pivot. When we say pivot, you need to look at the other way and what else can you generate your revenue for your company rather than just oil and gas. So some of the companies are already call themselves energy company instead of just oil and gas. So we call this as a great reset, and COVID-19 is definitely have accelerated the energy transition. When we started the year, there was a World Economic Forum in Davos. During that time, if everyone knows Greta Thunberg, so she walked from her home to Davos and walk and also take the train instead of flight. So that shows how her concern about the climate change. So people during that Davos in World Economic Forum talks about climate change. So everyone in the industry, and then I think is also started off with the Paris Protocol, where some of the countries, especially the European countries, are adopting to it, while some leaders in US are not keen to acknowledge the climate change. So you can see a different view from a different company around the world. So you have in one way, some company are moving into the direction of cleaner energy, zero carbon, fossil fuel and whatnot, and another one just push forward. Okay, you can read on the news about this diverging view from a different company, depend on where they are. Because for Europe company, they have to survive because they have to comply to their policy and legislation that sets by the European Union. So you can see that company like BP's, Shell, Total, ENI, Equinor, they totally divert and try to reduce their oil and gas portfolio and then investing in renewable energy. But the thing is, it is a balance. So for this company, oil and gas is still their core business. Like even in Malaysia, our PETRONAS is also looking at balancing act between this oil and gas and also renewable. So the cash generator that you spend your money, drillings, exploration and production, compared to go into renewable where there's a lot of players already in the market, and also the margin of that business, the value creation is quite small compared to the oil and gas. So it's all depends on the oil price. If the oil price stay still maintain at 40, then maybe it's good, still good, and it's going up, definitely good. So that's why this year we call it the Great Reset. So the industry need to shape themselves, behave to face the long future. Throughout the pandemic, definitely the pandemic have accelerated this energy transition, and we'll see how it goes. And I think everyone is monitoring closely the current presidential election in USA. So we still have not have a result who's going to be the president of United States. So if it's Biden, then you hear about the green deals that he want to move to more renewable and stop fracking and stop the shale gas, the unconventional production. So we'll see what because if US go to the Green Deal and supporting the climate change, then definitely the whole industry of the world will move forward. So then we'll see a different future altogether. But the company itself all different companies need to balance on their investment, and it's not about going to renewable. It's not about showing good or rebranding themselves. Is they need to do it. Everyone needs to do it because you need to balance your portfolio and your revenue, because your stakeholders and the shareholders demanding for you to make sure that it's profitable. And then it depends on the acceleration of renewable, the acceleration of technology, whether you can have hydrogen to be produced cheaply, and then a different kind of fuel altogether for the future.
Okay, thanks for that insight, use, right? So that's a lot. I guess each oil and gas companies view of renewables will also depend on where they are located, and like you said, companies that are based more in Europe would be more inclined towards renewable energy, as it is part of the of Europe's kind of policy or direction in that way, in contrast with companies that are more based on in the United States. In the past, you've seen that they are less keen towards or less inclined towards going into renewables. So that's Europe and United States. What about locally here in Malaysia? We actually have a question here from Umi Atika Kaza. I'll read the question here. Considering Petronas's commitment towards green energy, which typically signifies energy sources such as solar, how do you guys see the convergence between Petronas and Tenaga Nasional? How does Malaysia need to think about the future of these two mega companies of the country? So can you take that, use?
All right. Hi, Umi Atika. Thank you for that question. So basically, it's the same thing that what's happening in Europe and US. It's all started with the policy and the legislation, whether the country itself support the ESG, the sustainable guideline and plan, and the national energy policy need to be enhanced to improve. So there is no both company, Petronas and TNB, in terms of conversion, we are actually supporting the government. We are producing energy and also electricity for the nation. And currently, like Petronas, we are supplying gas for the fuel for power plant. And also TMB need to balance in terms of their portfolio, whether they want to use gas or they want to use coal. If the policy says that we want to reduce the emission for Malaysia, and that's the target for it, then definitely Suruhanjaya Tenaga as the overall determiner for this, they need to give a guideline. So whether how many percent energy in Malaysia are coming from gas, how many from coal. If they want to reduce the emission, then definitely the less cleaner energy need to be reduced. And then how do you want to top up the electricity power by using renewable, for example? One thing that our view, I mean, oil and gas, as an oil and gas, we view that gas is a transition fuel. When you say transition fuel, is more cleaner than oil. And going forward, that I think more than 20, 30 years from now, we're still going to use gas to power our power plant and produce electricity, because solar at the moment is still intermittent. You have an intermittency problem because it depends on sun, and as long as you don't have reliable or to produce the battery storage so that you can store the energy for use at night, definitely you still need gas to power your power plant. So it's still gas is required until you have. That's why I say about technology. When you have more technology that can improve in terms of battery storage, definitely we can see some changes happening.
Okay, thank you for that, Yus. So, and I guess another question that kind of comes up here is on the end of oil and gas, right? You mentioned that gas will still be the transition energy, transition energy source, even if we were to go towards fully renewable, until we address these technology intermittency or technology, what you call that, inadvocacy with renewable energy. So going to Fazil, right, as someone who is rather versed in understanding the oil and gas resources, is there really an imminent end for oil and gas? There's also a question here from Zahi in the audience. How much longer can the oil and gas industry be deemed lucrative, right, before these renewable energy technology, if we advance the renewable energy technology, will it win over, and is that going to happen?
Yep, Chap, thank you very much for the questions. I think Yus has mentioned quite a lot just now, but I would like to reiterate that with the simple questions. If let's say I ask you, Chap, tomorrow, if let's say you want to buy a car, I mean, what kind of car that you want to buy, whether it's an EV car or a conventional petrol car? I mean, but it's if I ask the audience as well, I believe the majority will actually answer that they will actually choose a conventional car, for example, right? So in this case, because we know that conventional car with a petrol powered car reliable, and it actually has been there, the technology is mature as opposed to EV car, and we know that Tesla is actually investing a lot in that, but apart from Tesla, no other companies are actually has surpassed that. So if you look at the statistics of the numbers of car in the world right now, I just look at Google just now when you was talking, it's like we have 1.4 billion numbers of car in total in the world right now. So out of 1.4 billion numbers of cars, only 5 to 10 millions are EV cars. So we are talking about only 1% of the cars that we drive out there are actually EV cars, as opposed to the petrol powered car. So we are talking from the perspective of, I want to bring the attentions to, we are talking from the demand side of the oil right now. So what you mentioned just now, when we have a demand, there surely it's just a matter of whether the supply will be a cleaner or a more efficient way. So when there is a demand or needs of oil consumption out there, then definitely there will be companies who will actually invest in it. So do you know how much consumption of a barrel per day of oil consumptions prior to COVID? I think you mentioned that as well, in which I would like to reiterate, it's about 96 million. And EIA predicted that in 2030 or 2040s, this 96 million barrel per day of oil consumption need will actually increase to nearly 140. So that means this increase in terms of oil demand and oil consumption is actually will still go on. And you mentioned just now there's the developed countries like Norway, UK, European countries are actually now moving towards renewable. But we have to look from the perspective of population, the world population itself. Most of the world population coming from the third world country as well as developing countries. India and China and Indonesia, right? Those are predicted to be, by the next 10 years, those are predicted to add up to 1.7 billion numbers of populations to whatever population that we have right now. So those in the developing nations, they are still reliant on conventional mediums, because of the conventional mediums are cheaper to get and is more reliable in terms of maintenance and stuff like that. So to answer the questions, whether renewables is the answers, definitely it will be. I mean, as what mentioned by the panelists before, definitely we'll get there because of on papers, renewable the choice of energy is cleaner, it's renewable, and it's easy to get. However, we have to look at the pace of the renewable energy right now. So I remember back in my secondary school or in primary school, we have been talking in science, in science project, for example, we are talking about solar powered car and everything. That was actually 30 years back, right? I'm 40 right now. So we are talking about 30 years ago, we are talking about cars that is powered by solars in science project. People have in universities, they are doing project in science project. They actually tell some people, oh, this is a solar powered car. But look at now, I mean, have we even seen that solar powered car on the road? So I'm talking about the pace of the renewable energy to actually replace the current energy. It's actually not there yet. So in the sense that, I mean, like how, in order for the new, I would like to bring attention, in order for a new energies or any new technology to replace a previous technology or previous energies, the new energies has to be ready. So are we, So as long as we cannot answer that, I believe the answer is still lies on whatever we have right now. So at least for the next 20 to 30 years, right? That's the first part on renewable readiness in terms of replacing current fossil fuel needs in terms of demands. The second point I would like to bring is in terms of the reserve out there. I mean, do we have reserve of oil? Because we know that oil is a non-renewable energies, so it cannot be replaced, right? So based on the year 2000 statistics, we still have statistics says that whatever reserve that we have right now, reserve means whatever the amount of oil that is proven to be produced and yet to be produced. Whatever we have right now in year 2000 actually will last for at least 50 to 70 years. So I'm talking about if the reserve is there, which is a current reserve with which already been found in year 2000. So coming out from 2000, we have a lot of technology coming from service companies like Schlumberger, Halliburton. We have a lot of new technologies to search for oil. So a lot of places that we haven't explored yet, especially Antarctica, for example, Arctic, right? We are talking about climate change where the weather now is becoming more hotter right now. So we are talking about Arctic now can be explored. So a lot of new places that is hard for us to explore will be viable for them in the future if the technology comes. So I'm talking about, my point is, if you're talking about the reserve of oil is going to deplete, whatever reserve that we have right now in the year 2000 will last for the next 50 to 70 years. And that will top up with the new technology that we have in terms of seismic processing to add to whatever we have right now. So 2 points that I would like to reiterate here and conclude is renewable ready? The answer is now. I believe we still have to ask ourselves. Second question is the demand of oil is still there and the reserve is still there for people to consume. The third point I would like to bring is in terms of is renewable energy really answered the environmental issues? We know that in oil and gas industry, we have a full cycle of a well life cycle from it's being drilled up until it's abandoned. We have a complete procedures to actually abandon a well so that it's safe for environment. But in renewable energy, if you're talking about solar power, for example, if you have to build the solar power farm, which is in the hectares of land, you have to actually diminish all these forests to build your solar powered farm. And then by the end of 30 years or 40 years, when that solar power is not being used, where this solar power grid is going to be disposed. So there's another issue as well from environmental point of view. Is renewable energy really answers our environmental issues? So those are the 3 points that probably I would like to bring up and for you guys to rethink again after this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, like you said, right, oil and gas is technically it's not renewable. It's a very limited energy source. But like you mentioned, there is still a lot of it out there, and even right now, and there's still more out there that cannot be recovered because of technology limitations. And I guess if we are able to develop technology to reduce those reserves, right, that would make I guess oil and gas to be attractive in a way in the future. At the same time, it's also related to the technology to develop renewables or to develop renewables and make it a sustainable source of energy. Like you mentioned, for example, solar, you still don't have a way for you to efficiently store the energy when it's nighttime, for example, right? So, and the next question, the next point, I guess, in my mind is related to us as consumers. That question you posed regarding, like, if you were to buy a car, would it be a an EV car or a conventional petrol car? That's interesting, right? Because a lot of people are demanding to have more renewable energy to be used. But then again, us as consumers, we need to create that demand so that the technology development can be done in parallel to create to cater to that demand. Okay. So Zahir, I hope that answers your question as well. Okay. And I guess we've talked at length about the complexity of this industry, right? The sheer scale of this industry, and we've talked about how it's expected for it to rise and fall, and whether we will rebound from where we are right now. And even we talked about the future that lies within the oil and gas industry, given that again we are that given that the source is limited, and technology is still not where we want it to be yet, right? Regardless of all that, regardless of all the complexity and uncertainties, and in the oil and gas industry, you still have so many people, especially here in Malaysia, who view the oil and gas industry as the choice industry to be in. So I guess, Farhana, right? You joined the industry at its high point when it was like $100 per barrel. Yet only 5 years into the industry, you are now in one of its lowest point. So what is your advice for young folks out there who want to join the oil and gas industry? Yeah, do you see them? Do you see like yeah? What's your advice to that? Oh, Farhana, you're still muted. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay.
can you hear me now? Okay. All right. So back then, when I went for the interview, one of the CEO, I think at that time, asked me, "So why do you want this job? I mean, is in this oil and gas industry and everything." So my answer was that I heard that it's quite a challenging industry. Not many women I know was in the industry at that time. Of course, now the perspective has changed. And now my answer is pretty consistent in back then until now. So because I like challenges, I kind of love it. As I described it before, there's a lot of technicalities and complexities within this industry. Some are known to others, like the drilling and also the hardship to go through to find oils and also the economic perspective on that. So the challenges is one of the biggest thing that drives me. So if you say you want to go into this industry because of how lucrative this industry, how you'll get a lot of money and everything. So no, right now it's no longer like that. But it's like it's about the same as any other industry. As used and Fadil mentioned before, there's up and downs. So I would say that still, if you like challenges, this is the industry you should look forward to join. Uh, but of course, there's going to be ups and downs. But as Fadil mentioned before, the oil and gas that is available now is gonna last for the next 30, 50 years. So there's still a lot of things that you can do, especially in terms of the technologies. Technologies is gonna evolve through times. I believe many services providers like J, Halliburton, and all, they are trying to maximize the profit, of course, and also trying new technologies in order to move forward. So I think it's still going to be relevant for quite some time. And then also for those people who are wondering if you should go into this industry, yes, I would say it's an interesting industry. But right now, if you're wondering what can you do, so I would say, uh, I mentioned before, you have to try to learn something new. Go ahead and take free courses. There's a lot of courses available online in any discipline that you might be interested in, either in petroleum engineering or the basis of data analysis and all that. So those things are still gonna be relevant even if it's not in this particular industry. What I'm trying to say is that you have to be versatile in how you try to be relevant in this industry. So yeah, that is my take on this. And yeah, you should try if you're wondering should you go in and go out. But bear in mind, nothing comes free, and of course the risk is always there. But if you go because you're passionate about it, so that is something it will be beneficial for you for a long time. So in terms of the relevance of oil and gas, I still believe that those people, currently holding the position manager and all that, one day, all the younger people, the fresh grads and also the currently lead or currently senior people, one day they're going to take all this position as well. So you have to be there for a long time, to really learn and see the industry. You kind of read the industry. So in the long term, it's going to be good for you and hopefully good for the industry overall. Yeah, so that's my take on it.
Okay, thanks. And I think that's a really important point. I actually discussed this a lot with some of my colleagues who joined about the same time as I did, right? Gone were the days of the heyday of the oil and gas industry where you think you will join and you will get a lot of money. So I would say that, like you said, right, it's important for you to realize that you can still you can still make money in this industry, but the reality of it now is that it's not as amazing as it used to be. Like Fadzil mentioned earlier, when he got his interview, just the interview, right, the college interview, he was flown to Nashville and given a stay in a 5-star hotel, flown business class, right? So nowadays you don't see a lot of that, what you call it, the luxury and the perks as you used to see it before. And I think it's important that, but that doesn't mean it's not a good industry to be in still, right? It depends on what you see as important. If you feel like challenge is something that you are attracted to, and then this would definitely be the industry for you. Right, you mentioned like Schlumberger, right, looking at technology, create further advancing technology, Farhana, and that relates to what to Fazil, right? So Fazil, you worked with an operator before, and now you are working with one of the largest oil and gas service provider in the company, who's also well known with advancing the technology in oil and gas. So what would you say to newcomers and veteran industry players on how you're going to cope for the future?
Okay, thanks, Chap. As I hold true to my point just now, where the demand of, as long as there is a demand of oil and as long as there's a reserve down there for company to produce, then all these oil companies will stay on. And the rising demands in the developing countries will actually create new job opportunities for new companies to actually create. So, I mean, some of the companies, current companies or giant companies now currently is actually changing towards renewables, and we still need new companies to actually hold on and supply this to answer all these demands increase in the next 30 to 40 years, right? So I would say that don't be afraid for the newcomers to actually join oil and gas, and as you mentioned that oil and gas is actually a lucrative industries, and I still believe it is. That's the reason why I'm staying on. Otherwise, I'll jump for a different industry. Otherwise, I'll be an influencer in the social media. But I guess oil and gas still holds strong as a lucrative industries. And the good thing about being in Schlumberger or oil and gas, being in oil and gas and petroleum engineering is actually niche. It requires niche knowledge and skills. That's the reason why there's a lot of companies out there, like operating companies and service companies. They are not afraid to send people for training because they believe that in order for them to come up with a solid judgment on how to produce oil, as I mentioned earlier, you need a specific skills for that. I have experienced it myself because when I first joined Schlumberger, they sent me to a lot of places like Paris, like Houston again, and then in Abu Dhabi, just to attend trainings for 5 weeks. So this actually one of the pros of working in oil and gas industry. I still believe all the oil and gas companies are still doing that. So my advice to young people out there, I mean, like, don't be afraid. Oil and gas is still a lucrative companies as long as you will still alive for the next 50 to 70 years. I think this is industry for you. The second thing I would like to remind to people out there, I mean, as we know that companies are actually doing a lot of transformations right now. It's like digital transformation, industry transformation, and you know that oil and gas industries are the slowest in terms of adapting this digital transformation. We have seen retail like Lazada's and Shopee have embracing this digital transformation a long time ago. Asia, for example, aviation industry has adopted this digital transformation a long time ago, but oil and gas are still working in silos. So that, in a way, that if you look in the glass half full, that is actually creates a new opportunity, especially for young people out there to explore, because of these digital transformations require specific skills like data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learnings. This kind of knowledge is probably those old timer like me may not know or may not be familiar of, right? So this will create a new branch of knowledge that the new people or the young generation out there to explore and get employed in oil and gas industry. So back to my point is, don't be afraid. Just join oil and gas industry, but what you need to do is to upskill yourself, multi-skill yourself to actually learn new things so that you can actually be adapt with the new directions of the oil and gas company is heading right now. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Fadzil. And I think that's a very what you call a repeating theme throughout our discussion. This whole 1.5 hours is really about technology and how we can further develop technology to push the boundaries of not just oil and gas, right, but also renewable energy if we want to penetrate it in that direction. So I guess for folks in the call right now or in the conference right now, engineering may not be the only way to go into the oil and gas industry. It might be going into data analytics, like you mentioned, IT, more IT related courses, right? So it's really depending on what you bring to the table, rather than, again, predefining what you do as your career in the future.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And okay, so you have a unique experience, right? In between all of us here, you joined the oil and gas industry after leaving another industry. So and I'm pretty sure we have a lot of folks in the line who are, in that same boat. So what is your advice to people who want to switch industries?
Thank you for the question, Shafiqah. So I've seen some of the question also. I'm going to touch a few of the question asked by the attendees. One about, how do you change from one industry to another? And there was a question about whether you should be a generalist or a specialist. And then there was a question about if you want to do a feed or you want to do engineering, what should you do, right? I'm going to tackle these three questions together. So basically, the first question is more about understanding the industry. So as mentioned before, every industry have ups and downs. So if you are active in the KLSC, the Bursa Saham and whatnot, so you understand the company. You can understand the company fundamental, what they do, what are the business, and then what are their long-term plan. So this is very important. Once you know the industry, and once you know the company that you're interested in, so then you pretty much understand about the whole industry, then is more comforting to you to move to that industry. I changed industry when it was at a time where there's not a lot of information out there in the internet. There's no LinkedIn, there's no Facebook and whatnot. So and it was just started, and the social media and whatnot. So you don't have any comfort. But now you name it, you have analysis from the market. You have LinkedIn where you can just ask people from the industry. You browse through, and then you can see people's experience. You can search, and try to understand about the industry and the companies. Always study and make research, and then after that, you need to understand what is your meaning and your end goal towards life, and calculate your plan, whether at the end of your retirement age at 60 or 65, what do you want to do? So then you can chart your career path by doing that. You can break it down into 5, 10 years, 15 years goal. And whether you want to be like board of directors, you want to be a scientist, you want to be a gamer, whatnot. So you have that plan before you retire. So once you decide, so don't stop learning, because for me, I come from a semiconductor industry. I study transistor, I study microelectronic, VLSI, and whatnot. When go to the different industry, you have to understand what are important. Engineer is just engineer. Every engineer, if whether you are civil, electrical, mechanical, you're the same, chemical. You can change your path along the way because you have the fundamentals, the math, the chemistry, the physics. That's important. In any engineering or any projects, you need all those. So that is the fundamental, but you learn from the job. So don't stop learning. Have a mentor, advisors. So that will help you. Support system, your colleague, and nowadays you can learn tremendous online learning that you have, like Harvard's Review, you have Skillshare, you have lynda.com and whatnot. So you can buy that very cheap online, and it's all about your attitude as well. It's all about learning, always continuous learning, because if you can see like people like me, people like Fadzil, hearing from us, we learn on the job. You have to dirty your hands. When you say dirty your hand, you go to the job. Farhana even go to the platforms, go to the offshore facilities and understand how the people install the barge, install the jacket, and do the topside installation. So that experience can help you throughout your career changing experience, right? So reach out, and now you have us, the alumni in Malaysia as well. You know us, and you have our direct contacts. You can always contact us from now on, and then definitely don't stop learning, right? And then to answer the question about generalists and specialists, this is go beyond. I mean, I know that for people in HR, in digital ITs, finance, they can work anywhere around the world in any industry. It's just easy for them to pivot to the new industry. But for engineers, because different industry have a different technical knowledge, know-how, and the facilities, you have to learn, and it's quite easy once you are having engineering background. You can move to a different industry easy, and you can decide whether you want to be specialist or generalist. I know some people in the company, and any company in the world have that like career ladder where you can be a specialist, where we call them the gray hair. Until they're retired, they are specialists in one thing and one thing only. But they can become PhD, doctor, and scientist. And you can also have a generalist, like myself as well. I learn about compressors, I learn about subsurface PE, I learn about corporates as well, and commercials. So you can do both ways in any industry, or even in the oil and gas. So if even people like Fazil also, even though he's a PE or geologist, even like the renewable also need people, geologists. Renewable also need to know about rocks, about the subsurface, because if they install a solar panel, now they're talking about solar panels at sea. They're talking even like in Holland, Netherlands, and whatnot. They have wind turbine at sea. So definitely they need to know about the geology and the subsurface as well when they install this material. So it's easy for you to divert if you have that. And now we're talking about data analytics, machine learning. So everybody can learn that, Python, co-programming, C++, and whatnot. And now we're talking about a huge number of data available in the industry. They call it data is the new oil. So learn about this. So even though that if you pivot from one job function to another job, data is the future. So learn about data, learn about machine language, machine learning, that will be good. In our company, we call it retooling human capital, that you can move around people from one skill group to a different skill group. So it's just, it's not easy, but that's why attitude is very important. Attitude about continuous learning and dirty your hand to experience all that. So I think that's it that I can say about that.
Okay, thank you, Yus. And you, something you mentioned about, like, I think it's important is to not stop learning, right? And one thing that is always in my mind is when I first got my offer letter. A lot of people might I've shared this story with a lot of people, but when I first got my offer letter as a it says that it was a reservoir engineer, right? My of the job title, and I was like, what is a reservoir? I'm like, what, I had no idea what it was. So I mentioned this to my hiring manager at that time, and what he mentioned to me is something that has stuck with me ever since. He mentioned that we don't hire you because we know that you know how to do the job. We hire you because we know that you can learn how to do the job. And I think that is something that will forever resonate with me, and to not stop learning. And like you mentioned, if you have the fundamentals, I like to quote, when you were mentioning all that, it totally reminded me of Doc V. So if you're from Vandy, you would know Doc V, and his infamous, you got to know the basic concepts. So if you know the basic concepts, you'll be able to survive anywhere. So I think that's what's important for folks to realize, regardless in whether you're in the oil and gas industry or elsewhere, right? Okay, so yeah, so that actually concludes the total planned questions that we have right now. Right now we're gonna move on to talk about the to the Q&A that has been raised throughout our discussion. So let me just put this one of the one of the themes that popped up in this Q&A is folks are interested to know what is the future of oil and gas in Malaysia, right? Given that we know that oil and gas is a declining business, and given that we have a lot of resources, but at one point it's going to end. So what and right now, given that we are depleting some of the more easier or low hanging fruits, are there more higher cost and low recovery kind of resources that are still pending, that we can tap into to get to secure the oil and gas future in Malaysia? Yeah, I was thinking, Fazil, would you want to take that? This is a
Yep, yep.
question from Zulhilmi. Sorry, yeah.
Which question is that?
The question from Zulhilmi.
From Zulkifli.
High OPEX, low recovery resources. Is that going to be the future? Because right now we are doing a lot of conventional work, right? A lot of like very straightforward reservoirs, no issue, low OPEX. But as we deplete the resources from there, do we foresee going into more higher OPEX? I guess in a way it's kind of like the unconventional or the shale oils, right, where it takes up a lot of OPEX. Yeah, is that going to be
That's a very interesting thought. If you're comparing Malaysia's and US, for example, US, we know that the booming of oil productions in US that surpassed the biggest production of Saudi before is actually due to a shale and fracking of hydraulic fracturing technologies, right? I don't see that's really being implemented here because of I still believe that the all players that are actually operating in Malaysia are still having the reserve bookings that can still meet the demand of the market right now. So in order to apply a new technology like fracking, we really need to understand the technology itself, and that has not been the choice of technology within Asia, I would say within Malaysia as well. So to answer that questions, I believe that companies are going towards making their current reserve to be produced more efficient, in the sense that by implementing some kind of a transformations, but not towards applying a different kind of a methodology in terms of fracking and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for that. So I guess again it goes back to technology, right? Whether or not it would be applicable to here in Malaysia. I don't think we have shale oil or shale gas as they do in the United States. So it's probably more exploration that needs to be done here in Malaysia.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so we are actually nearing the end of our session. There's still a few more questions that we have not answered yet. But don't worry, everyone. These unanswered questions will be replied to in an email. So since you signed up for this, right? All the unanswered questions, we will look at it and we will actually reply. The panelists will actually respond to them via email. So you will get the responses to your unanswered questions. Okay. So are there any imminent questions that the audience want to be answered now? They cannot wait for when we reply. If there is, please let us know. If not, I would just want to thank the panelists, Farhana, Fadzil, and Yus. Thank you so much for spending time and sharing with us your thoughts on this topic, the future of oil. I would also like to thank the folks behind the scenes who have been part of this forum. We have Ayman, who has been taking care of the slide, the technical part of the slide, and you have Zakia, who has been the general coordinator for our session, and actually for the Vandy Alumni Malaysia Chapter, and also Susan and Caroline all the way from Vandy Alumni Office. Thank you so much for being here with us and coordinating this. It's actually morning in their time, so hope you guys have a great rest of the day, Susan and Caroline. Just for the benefit of the audience, we also have the contact details of each of the panelists, and apparently also me. If you want to reach out to ask any specific questions, there's also LinkedIn information if you wanted to connect that way. If you have any suggestion for future topics that you want us to talk about here in the Vandy Malaysia Alumni Chapter, Vandy Alumni Malaysia Chapter, please let us know. Follow vandyalumni.my on Instagram and on Facebook. You can also connect with us through LinkedIn as displayed here. We don't share just about oil and gas. We share about a myriad of things. So if you go to the Vandy Alumni page on Instagram, you'll see that we have a lot of information on a lot of topics, especially on career advice and general insights. So last but not least, thank you so much for the audience. We have about 65 here with us today. Thank you so much for spending time with us. There will be a survey that will be sent to you soon. So please, we look forward to hearing what is your thought on the discussion today. And if you have any other feedback, please share that with us. So I think that is all. And yep, we are right at time. So thank you guys so much for joining. There's actually a link to the survey in the chat box. So if you can just take a few moments to provide your feedback, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you guys so much, and thank you to the panelists as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you, everyone. All right. Have a good night.